Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading from the One Year Bible, and we examine some questions that extend our learning from the sermon on Sunday. Today I'm joined by Alyssa, Bream, and Wilkin, and we're looking at a passage from John chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. It says, "When the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, 'Surely he is a prophet. He is the prophet we have been expecting.' When Jesus saw that they were ready to force him to be their king, he slipped away into the hills by himself." So the immediate question that comes to mind when I read this verse was to ask why people wanted to force Jesus to be their king, right? What was it about the miracle of the loaves and the fish, Dylan, that prompted this from the people?
I think first of all, we should recognize how this miracle affected the people that were there. It created like this a messianic expectation. In Deuteronomy 18:15, it records that a prophecy was given to Moses, which stated, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me among your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him." One of the miracles from the time of Moses was that bread was supernaturally provided in the wilderness. So the people were able to make a direct parallel between Jesus and Moses at that time. It was clear to them that Jesus was the prophet who Moses predicted would come. It created a desire for political revolution as well. The Jewish people in the first century were living under Roman occupation. They were heavily taxed and oppressed. The messianic expectations prompted their desire for Jesus to deliver them from Roman occupation. They connected the Mosaic prophet who was to come with that deliverance. What is insightful to us is how Jesus was able to recognize the expectations of the people. People were contrary to the Father's perfect will in this moment.
Yeah. So, Alyssa, we're talking about how believers manage stress this week, and there's a lot of people listening to this podcast today who probably deal with stress caused from the pressure to live up to other people's expectations. So, what are some of the ways that this can create stress for us?
I think other people's expectations might be unrealistic for our life. People often expect us to be more than what we are, stronger, more available, more successful, or even just they expect you to be perfect. If we attempt to live up to all of these expectations that everyone has of us, it can make us feel like we're constantly having to perform. And when we don't live up to it, it leads to failure and disappointment. Other people's expectations might attempt to pressure us into a role that we just don't fit in. Because God has created each person with special gifts and abilities, and oftentimes others think they know the best way that we should use our gifts instead of what God has shown us. We can end up doing things that aren't really meant for us simply because we feel obligated. A huge source of stress is created by other people's expectations. It comes from the fear of disappointing others. People-pleasing is a term that gets used a lot in today's society, but it really is a problem. Fearing if we don't meet their expectations, we'll lose love, approval, respect. And this creates stress because we're constantly worrying about how others think of us instead of worrying about living for God and that confidence we have in His calling. So how do you think that we should respond when we feel that pressure of other people's expectations?
Yeah, I think we have a really good example right here. Jesus knew when to say no. He didn't allow the crowd's behavior or opinion to dictate his behavior. There's a favorite saying of mine that it says no is a complete sentence, right? In other words, you can say no and not have to explain why you said no. You don't have to allow other people to put a demand on you that God has not placed on you. Second, Jesus withdrew and prayed. I think the biggest source of stress comes when human expectations and God's will find themselves at odds. And the best way to find out God's will for a decision is for us to withdraw, like read scripture, spend some time in prayer. And I think these are two practical applications for dealing with other people's expectations. So if we're not clear about what God has called us to do, we can easily get distracted by what others want from us. So how can you clearly know what God has called us to do?
I'd say for me, if there's a time where I'm unsure, where I'm gonna look first is to God in prayer and spend time in the Word. When I feel the peace and clarity from God in a situation, that's when I know that I'm on the right path.
I think there are a lot of other tools out there that we can use to help discern things, because by the time you get to your 20s, you have heard a lot of different people's ideas and expectations of you. And I found that there are some really helpful tools, like the Enneagram is something that really, when our staff did that, 5 years ago at this point, maybe?
Yeah.
It's been a while. It's something that helped me know about who I am, but also helped me like realize like that other people's giftings, like not everyone is going to be as worried about being perfect on details as I am, and that I shouldn't put that on other people. That Steve is going to bulldoze people because that's his Enneagram number, the bulldozer number. No, that it really helped us like understand where people's perspectives were coming from. But I think that helps. Like there's a whole bunch of tools out there that you can use. What is the INFP? What is that one called? Myers-Briggs? Okay. Is that the right one?
Yeah, Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs.
Be confident.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I want to see, yeah, disc profile. We use that one in.
You know, that's the disc, right? No.
Disc, no, INFP or whatever is Myers-Briggs.
Okay, I don't know. Google what tools.
Disc is the one we use in grocery.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. If you're kind of stuck and not knowing, yes, prayer and reading the Bible, conversations with people, but some of those tools might help you uncover some giftings and abilities that will help clarify some things, because God doesn't expect us to be on an island and just for like it miraculously to download to our brains.
Right.
Like there are things out there that can help us in this world.
Right.
Yeah, give clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have trouble saying no without feeling like you have to explain to someone why you're saying no?
Sorry, that's funny.
Maybe the first question would be, do you say no?
No. I'm really bad at saying no. I said yesterday, I did this yesterday with you. You said, do you want to listen to Steve's sermon? And I answered no, which was, normally I'd say yes. But the second I said no, I also explained myself as well. I was like, no, I have to do this, and this, and that's why I said no. When in all seriousness, I didn't necessarily have to do that.
So you said no just to be mean?
No, no. I'm saying I didn't have to explain myself all the way.
You probably shouldn't have brought this up.
We're gonna go have one of those meetings after this.
You should have used like a random example that didn't include somebody that was sitting at the table.
Use Steve as an example.
Yeah. I'm not a good person saying no. I'm really not. I don't think that I'm a people pleaser. I do like to please people, and those are two different things. A people pleaser makes it their ultimate goal to make sure that everybody around them is happy and happy with them. I enjoy pleasing people when it's possible for me to. Most times I will. There are certain things though. Whenever I say no, I feel bad. I feel like it looks like unloving or uncaring, and so I feel the need to explain myself. So to answer the question, I certainly have trouble saying no, and but I have to explain myself. I can't just say no. There's no way.
Yeah, I think in my job, a lot of it that I do is a support role. I feel like I'm not going to say no to those things because it's things that people need. I think so. I'm trying to think of times where I've said no, and it is hard to think of those. Feeling like you need to explain yourself, I think, is a very human reaction. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, explaining yourself isn't the worst thing in the world. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And maybe that's the people pleasing in me, but mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of people do take no as just no. Like, so when Bella tells me no, she doesn't have to explain herself, um, because I understand her heart already. But say Steve tells me no, like I would probably want an explanation. But a lot of people don't require that that explanation is kind of what I've noticed. A lot of people do though, I think.
I think one of the reasons why we feel like we need to explain ourselves is so that we can help control the narrative. Because if we just say no, that person can go away and assume whatever the reason. They don't care,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you Alyssa, you talked about job support role kind of things. There would be reasons why, like right now during this, because as we're recording this, we're 10 days from Easter. There's a lot going on. There would be legitimate reasons why, if somebody came to you with a request, you would say no. Part of the reason why you would want to explain yourself is so the person didn't walk away thinking it was a bad idea, because you might like the idea. As a matter of fact, we exchanged a couple of messages about an idea that we were considering doing. We didn't do it, but it's not always. Some of the reason why you explain yourself is because you want the person to know, hey, I like the idea. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't have the bandwidth to do it, or I don't have the time to do it, or I have something else going on. And I think the closer the relationship, it could be work, it could be family, it could be a lot of different things. We feel more obligated to explain. If it's somebody that we're not overly connected to, I think sometimes we can just say, no, I'm not available, and that's the end of the conversation. We don't feel too bad about it. I think most of the time, the reason why we explain ourselves is we want to control what that other person thinks. And you said it's not a terrible thing to explain yourself. I don't disagree with that. I think that I think sometimes it puts the other person's mind at ease, and they don't take it so personally either. But I do think we can fall into a trap of feeling like we have to explain to people why we're not going to, do whatever. I saw a reel the other day by a guy that in our business, we're working through one of his books together, but his reel said, I've never seen a high functioning leader that returned every email, every text, every phone call. He said, I'd never met that person that did that. He said, because what has to happen is they have to sort through, okay, is this worth my time?
Yeah.
Can I do this? Can I manage this? And then move on, because whether we like this or not, and this sounds really crass, but you still have to prioritize things, right? And some things at that moment are not worth your time. They're not worth your effort. They're not. It's not. Doesn't mean they're invaluable or not good. If I came to you with a great video idea that I wanted to use on Sunday, today it's Wednesday, by the way, the day we're recording this.
I would say no.
Yeah, but right. No matter how great it was, right? And I could get all beside myself about it if I wanted to, but there's a lot of things that go into play about that. And I think some of it does have to do with whether we know people and know people's hearts. But I think sometimes we feel like we have to explain ourselves, and explaining ourselves isn't the worst.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to get better at, is not feeling the need to over-explain. I think, I don't know, I think in our jobs we work with people, and I mean every job works with people, but we also work for people, right? And so a lot of what we think about goes into what their emotions are at a time, or how they're feeling about something, or I don't know. So I'm getting better at saying no, because I'm getting better at setting boundaries. But but I think I over-explain sometimes where they're like, bro, I didn't need to know that. I just
You
wanted
had to
know.
work that in. You had to work bruh into the.
Like, I just wanted to know your answer.
And for all of you who we just had this big long bruh bro conversation pre-podcast, so now bruh has made it, and in context, it's bad. Bruh.
Bro.
Okay. You good now that you got it in here?
Yeah.
Good. It was creating stress for me. I'm just kidding. All right. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us on Monday as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the One Year Bible.